All right, welcome back to part 2 of with KADOSH Life and Unfiltered Rise with Heidi Luv. We're talking about the Antichrist Nephilim Mormon cult today. And and my dog just started squeaking her toy. She's like, I'm here too.
Doggy's here. Doggy in the house.
Yeah, we just finished up with part 1 talking about going into some interesting stuff. So let's get into this because this isn't stuff that they're going to publish, right? They're not going to publish. Oh, these are what Nephilim look like after so many lines. And so I've worked in the medical field. You work in the medical field, being a generational healer, both of us coming from these bloodlines. I think we're two pretty good options to be able to speak to the observations of humanity and what's going on with these traits of the hybrids that we're noticing having grown up in incestuous Mormonville.
Yes, Mormonville, yes.
Yeah, so keep talking about, you were talking about what part of Utah were you saying where they're really pale? Are you talking about the FLDS or the polygamists that are?
The FLDS that are polygamous, and they live, so I lived in St. George, Utah, which they have, it's in Arizona. They have like an actual city that is their city. Why can't I think of Colorado City? And if you try to go there, like just like out of curiosity or something like that, they have their own police, they have their own sheriff, they will escort your butt right on out of there.
Yeah, the order.
They don't play. Yeah, they don't play. And it's the brethren, and you will be gone.
Yeah.
And some people have really gotten hurt from there, different things. Cause I mean, they just don't want outsiders there. And so, but the people, when I would see them, a lot of times, especially the Jeff's clan, are very fair. And when I mean fair, I mean like unnaturally fair, light skin, light eyes, light everything, but they have all these weird genetic disorders. And it's not just a couple.
Yeah.
It's like things that are incompatible with life sometimes. And they know it. And it's really strange.
And it's not just because they wear dresses down to their ankles all day and shirts to their wrists.
I mean, and that would actually probably help you, right? Because all your business would be all,
I've never been up close and personal enough to be able to like see, the difference in, to really be able to notice the skin tone or get a good look at their face. And
as a medical provider, where we were the nearest hospital, we would see all kinds of people.
Oh, so you're seeing them like in the bed, like.
Yeah. Yep. We're seeing all the things, and it's really wild, but they don't come unless it's like they have their own medical people for the most part. But this is if the crap really hits the fan. If you see a polygamous person, especially having a baby, the crap has probably hit the fan, or they're expecting a baby that's going to be really like not okay. Like they've had prenatal.
Yeah, because they have their own midwives and they don't deliver.
They have everything.
Hospitals. Nope, and unless they think somebody's about to die and somebody's going to lose their life, they don't come in.
Yes. And so I would see it all the time, and I would just be like, how are they so fair? And it was just kind of odd to me. I never put 2 and 2 together, but you do know there's a lot of incest there, even if you're just a normie, because I mean, they only have so many family lines, and they don't marry outside their family lines. So
most of them, in the Kingston clan, I've been listening to a lot of the girls who come out of the Kingston's
clan, a lot different.
It's probably somewhat similar within the FLDS. Kingston, they marry their half siblings, and they're getting to the point where they can't even, procreate anymore. And so, how do you know in the FLDS how? Well, let's clarify for people who don't know what those are.
That's true.
We have all these different groups who essentially claim Joseph Smith as their prophet, and they live, different polygamy lifestyles. And, I just feel like Joseph Smith is somebody that a lot of people just latch on to, because you've got the people who claim Joseph Smith as their prophet who were doing the polygamous show. They had their own reality show. Do you remember what that was?
Oh, no, I never heard about this.
I can't remember what it was called. They weren't even affiliated with
wait. Yes,
a bigger group.
Sister Wives.
Yeah.
Yes. Sister Wives.
Yeah. And they claimed Joseph Smith, but they weren't even a part of FLDS or a certain group. It was just like,
they just believed
a bunch of wives, and they're like, hey, I love Joseph. Marry me.
Right. Yeah. I remember that now because I was like, oh yeah. And I think they may have been a part of looking at them. If you look at his second wife, Janelle, well, actually, I absolutely know Warren Jeffs they were a part of the Jeffs clan because Christine, the third wife of him, is a Jeffs. It was like
Oh,
her uncle or something. See, because we know a lot of FLDS people that have escaped out. And so my husband knew somebody that was like her cousin or something like that.
so
Even the
they
guy that I know that's out is cousins with my husband's friend that's out, even though they don't like, I mean, it was totally random. Like I just
so they
mentioned, oh
leave
yeah,
and come out, but they still will live polygamy, some of them, but
sometimes,
they don't
sometimes.
stay in the clan and live on the
No, they can't. They can't live there anymore. They
yeah,
get kicked
yeah.
out. And actually, the guy that I'm going to be interviewing, so he was married to my sister, and he lost his family because what they can do is they can take your family from you if they want to. If they feel you're not doing whatever you're supposed to be doing or whatever, they will take your wives and children and they will give them to somebody else.
He had
And I know,
kids.
yep, he did with them. And so when we went to the wedding for my sister, it was super awkward because like half of us were just normal Mormons and then the other half were like little, like they were dressed, they don't ever change how they dress. They
Yeah.
were like Little House on the Prairie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They do their hair a certain way, like how I've got my hair like this, but it's like a more of a swoop. And sometimes they do too, but they never cut their hair because their hair is their crowning glory and they believe they're going to wash Jesus's feet with their hair. So
Yeah.
but
Wash
yeah,
Jesus's hair with. Did
I'm
they
like,
actually say that? Wash Jesus' hair,
ah,
or are you just
I
being funny?
don't know. No, I'm serious. Like that's like they really, yeah, they really think that, and they're really weird about it. And it's like a punishment. If you get punished there, they will cut your hair because it's like not a thing. You cannot have short
Wow.
hair as a woman. And they'll take their children away. It's really hard to get the kids back. Like it's wild. And so Isaac, I haven't read the whole book yet, but I know he got out. Like he no longer does any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really sad because I mean he
Wow.
actually really loved his wife and stuff. So even though I think most of their marriages are arranged, and they kick a lot of the boys out. There's
Oh
they
yeah.
they don't want them
Yeah,
there.
because they don't want to have to share the wives with them, and
Yep.
I do think that they practice within, because I saw a guy coming out recently and he's gay, and he's talking about how he came out gay within the FLDS family.
Oh
And so
man.
one of my questions I really want to interview and talk to them about is like, because they have their brotherhoods too, but they call it the order. It comes from Joseph Smith. These men
Yeah.
go off rogue and start their own religion, and so I'm sure they still have the Freemason sodomy rituals going on within these
Right.
bloodlines, right? But they're not going to talk about any of that stuff. But I'm sure that there's some of those lost boys who,
Yep.
that I think that's what they
The
call them, that
Lost
get
Boys.
kicked out.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And I would love to go and interview a bunch of them and find out their
Me
bigger
too.
secrets,
Oh.
because the girls who are coming out, they talk about how these men are of this bloodline of Jesus. And one of the things I wish they would say, which I haven't heard any of them say, is that they say they are, but they're not. It's almost like I wonder if those girls still think that and just like they're just messed up, but they come
Oh.
from the bloodline of Jesus. But that's something that the Luciferian Nephilim, like blood
So
cult, will
here's my
grab
like,
onto and claim in order to do wicked, vile, evil. Hey, we're of the bloodline of Jesus. And they know that they're not. That's what I want to ask them is, do you
do
think that
you
they
know?
actually do you think that these men actually believe that they're of the bloodline of Jesus, or do you believe that they know damn well that they're serpents and that they
Well,
just say
but
that in order
But
to
what if they've lied to them so much that they believe their God is the Abraxas God or Nephilim God, and they look like that, and they believe that because of the whole Joseph thing and the angel thing? So maybe they really do believe that they are
girl?
related to God, because
Okay, because
I
you know
do
what? Okay,
that.
my dad's a Freemason.
Hmm.
My dad's a
Yep, my whole
So you want to
family.
know what
Yeah.
he told me? You just
What's
you
up?
just hit a nail on the head, because this is what my dad told me. And I still struggle to understand, because it kind of makes sense in a
Hmm.
way. And I can see exactly what you're saying, because this is what my dad told me. He said, "Did you know?" Okay, so in the Bible, there's the story about when God sent the fiery flying serpents to come and bite the people, the children of Israel, because they were wandering in the wilderness, they weren't being obedient, and so he sent the flying fiery serpents, and they bit the people, and they were gonna die. And all they had to do is Moses put a staff on the hill and put a serpent on the staff, right? And so all the people had to do was look at the serpent, and they would be healed, right? In the Book of Mormon, there's this story is also in the Book of Mormon, but it's a little different, and there's some added parts. And in the Book of Mormon, what it says is because they would not look, the people would not look, and some of them perished because of the simpleness of the way. It was too easy. And so my dad used to always teach me these parables, like these allegories.
That's so funny because, okay, the serpent around the staff is the same as the medical sign.
Yeah, wouldn't you know, I went and got that tattooed on my ass.
Pharmakeia. I almost tattooed that on my body.
Shut up.
This close. And the only reason why I didn't was because my grandpa was like, oh my gosh. Like he was like,
you told your grandpa before you went to get it?
Yeah. Well, because he was a biker. So I
got it when I was 18. And you want to know what happened with me? Like right when I turned 18, I wanted a tattoo and I didn't know what I wanted. I went in, I was flipping through, and so when I was young, I wanted to be a forensic pathologist, and I wanted to go to medical school, but I was too stupid with math. I'm not right brained. But I ended up working in the ER, and I was just really drawn to like the human body and like gross stuff. I was just kind of into gross stuff. So I thought it would be interesting to do, autopsies. So that was my path. I was going to go into the medical field. And so I was like, oh, the medical symbol. So that was what I thought it was. The medical symbol just points to, I'm going to go into the medical field. So I tattooed the KADOSH on my butt when I was 18. And the only reason I got it there was because we were Mormon and I had to hide it from my parents, and I didn't want them to know.
Right.
And so, and it's interesting because it's changed meaning over time. And I still, even though I could regret it, it's interesting because, all things come full circle. And when I was in the New Age, the 13th hidden sign, speaking of 13 again, the 13th hidden sign of the zodiac is called how do you say it? Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus, okay? And a lot of people don't know about this 13th hidden sign. But my brother's vampire.
I didn't know that.
I always called him his butt buddy. That's what he is.
His vampire.
Told me about this Ophiuchus 13th hidden sign that he found painted on the ground in Japan, and how I should look at it because my birthday fell under it, and I went and read it, and it's actually the double serpent energy.
Oh, wow.
And this KADOSH has the two serpents that go up, which is the symbol of the Kundalini energy.
Right. I knew that one.
Right. And
that's
so
weird.
This ancient symbol that we're told is the medical symbol is actually the worship of the serpent and the Kundalini climbing up your spine. And they go, oh yeah, but it's also, those two serpents also are the double helix of the DNA. Well, yeah, that's telling you the serpent hybrid Nephilim genetics. I have that tattooed on my butt.
Wow.
Telling you I'm serpent hybrid Nephilim DNA, right?
I did. My very first tattoo was a lizard though. And so that's it's gone now, but I was like too scared to get hardly anything else. And I was like you, I wanted to hide it because my family wasn't down, and I put it on my ankle, and it was a tiny little gecko lizard.
Wow. Well, so then I got my shaman, and I don't have any black in this one, but it's a shaman, and she essentially looks like a witch, and she has like a feathers hat, and she has all these birds and the flower of life coming out.
Oh wow.
I got that while I was going into shamanism because I was certain that was going to be, my thing.
Your way.
But when I was leaving Mormonism and studying more Hebrew stuff on my hand, and this one's faded. I don't like black, so I get only color. This one's faded quite a bit, but it's the sword of truth with the word truth in Hebrew, which is spelled Aleph Mem Tav. And the Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. Mem is the middle letter of the alphabet. And Tav is the last letter of the alphabet. And that means the beginning, the middle, and the end, things as they were, are, or will be. So in order to understand truth, it tells you the word truth in Hebrew that it has to encompass the whole of everything. But it's funny because it has the Star of David in it.
Oh, wow.
Which is like the compass.
We
But
have,
you know what that means to me now? Because my sister used to always say to me, "Well, you have a Freemason tattoo on your hand," and I'm like, "It's Hebrew. What do you mean it's Freemason?"
right.
Well, I didn't know the Star of Ram fan. The Star of David at the time was, the
Funny
of the
that she
square,
knew. Funny that she knew.
right?
Ah,
Funny witch. That's funny witch.
yeah.
And so I've got this star at the top of the sword, and it's the sword of truth in Hebrew. So essentially, it's like now what it means to me is you'll expose the Freemasons. You'll
Oh,
bring the truth. You'll bring the truth. So they're all little prophecies in their own way.
yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
I want to go back.
That's
Let's keep
wild.
talking. Let's
Yeah.
keep talking about, because you were going to go into the redhead stuff too, and
Oh,
and what you
I'm
see
so
in Utah with these. Because you know what, when as I started talking about this, I get messages from people all over, even people in Newport Beach who live like in California area will write me and tell me like, I know who the Mormons are. You can see it because they have these really big eyes and they're really
mhm.
far apart, and they almost look like a deer in the headlights, and they have this certain pale kind of look. There's a look.
Quit talking about
There's
my
a look.
skin.
Right. There's a look to the Gentile nation of
Just
Mormonism.
teasing. Well, and
And
I do find it interesting that they were obsessed with making the Mormons more white and delightsome. And why?
in the
There
Book
are
of Mormon, go into
so
that. What does the Book
many.
of Mormon say
Yes. And
about it?
that was actually a direct quote from more than one prophet. But so Brigham Young said it first and said, we need to buy as many of these native children as we can, like literally purchase, and make them more white and delightsome by integrating them into our stuff. And then also, even as far down as Kimball, he said it at one of their conferences. He's quoted as saying, I'm so glad over all the years that we've had the Native brothers. Oh, no, they said Lamanite brothers. And they've joined in our ranks, making them all so more white and delightsome. Like they were really focused on this white and delightsome thing. And I always thought it was really weird because I'm a very non-racist person. And back when when I was talking to you about like how even though as a kid I was really indoctrinated, even though as a kid I was told a lot of things, I knew what was right and wrong kind of in my heart. Like
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
I have this horrible hard life. And so I think I figured out God on my own, kind of like just talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
And my stepdad was superiorly racist. And I always thought,
Superiorly.
oh my gosh. And actually, this is going to be a funny story because this is God. This is what God does with things that are stupid. So he always used to try and tell me, like, God doesn't want intermixing and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I always thought, I don't think he cares. I think you're wrong, but I wouldn't say that. But in my brain, I was always like, I mean,
Well,
he
my
made
dad
us
was the
all,
exact same way. I had a black
yeah.
boyfriend that was like the star of the football team for 4 years in college, and he was not
And
about
they
it.
just are weird. Yeah. And I've dated I've dated whoever I wanted, like black, brown, I don't care,
Yeah.
Polynesian, white. And it was really weird because what's funny is my stepdad only had one kid, my brother, and he's passed on now. And my brother only had one kid, and she is black, and that is God. If your whole posterity is now going to be black because you were a racist ass, that is God saying, learn your lesson. And he did. He loves her, and that's good because he should,
That
right?
is so funny and awesome
Yes.
because,
Yes. That
well,
is God.
I want to keep talking about this, but remind me to go back because I didn't finish the Nephilim Nephi thing. So I'll go back to that in a minute. But about that, I want to say, it's interesting because I did date a lot of black people when I was in college. I had a friend who was like the head, not head. She worked in the athletic department, like icing the athletes. So she connected me with a few people, and I had a badonkadonk.
So do
That's
I.
what they
That's
called
why.
it.
Maybe that's why they like.
Some junk in the trunk.
Yes, definitely.
So I would walk through the hub. I went to Utah State in Logan, and I'd walk through the hub, and they would holler at me, like, hi, like, hey girl, like,
Ah,
I white boys do not do that kind of stuff.
no,
And all the
no.
white boys I grew up around, they were all little sodomites. So they didn't know how to
Uh,
like holler at a girl. And black guys
right.
know how to make a girl feel like, hey,
Yep.
and
They
so I was like,
notice. Yep.
whoa. And so my friends used to tease me because they would say, what did you learn at Ebonics 101 today? Because I would go sit in the hub and talk to the Black guys, and they all spoke Ebonics. You know, they were from all over on the football team. And I got to know all these guys. And so I dated several of them. And most of my friends through all of college were Black. And I learned a lot about the people, you know, and
the culture.
Yes, it was fascinating. My boyfriend was interesting, though, because the one I ended up like in a long-term relationship with, he was from Utah, and he grew up all around Mormons. And he was the only Black guy I knew that had two parents that were still married. And his mom used to be a cop and stuff. And he was actually the student body president of Ben Lomond High School. And he knew every student's name in the entire school.
Oh my
He knew
gosh.
every student's name in the entire school. He knew everyone. And he was a social, like, he blew my mind, you know. And it was funny because when I was hanging out with these people, I developed, well, I grew up, my dad had me watch the whole Roots thing, you know, and we
my grandpa too. That's so funny.
Yeah, there's no Black people in Utah. And then the one Black girl that went to my high school, she ended up being a cheerleader on the cheerleading squad with me, and she was like my best friend, and we just would laugh our butts off. And so when I was in college, people always actually, until they would meet me, because I had a Black boyfriend, if they would just hear about me, they thought I was Black because my name was Sharisa. Right.
Yeah,
and so I'd meet people and they'd be like, what? You're white? I thought you were Black. How do you have a name like Sharisa?
A different name. Yeah. That's funny. Oh my gosh.
So what I got to know about the Black race was growing up white and being ignorant to so many things about that was why white people enslaved them and were so jealous of them.
Oh, well, I mean, honestly, they have. So my husband's a weightlifter, and he always tells me, like, if you want to see natural muscle, like if you want to see like almost like a perfect like body without roids, like look at a Black guy. Like they always get the best muscle structure. They're stronger. They're, you know, and it's actually genetically true. It's like genetically true that their muscles are stronger. Yeah. They're bigger, you know, they're taller. Oh, not every single one.
And so you can look at the physical and the structure, but when you go in and you get to know them, you also understand that, like, just in general speaking, they're way better than white people. Why white people enslave them? Because white man was so jealous of the Black man because they're way better than you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
I think jealousy was a big factor.
They are so well-rounded. They're good at everything. They know how to get a woman. They know how to treat a woman, even though
they cook. They know
how to cook. They know what's important. You know, they do work really hard, even if it's not all about the money. They're hilarious. They're spiritual and street smart. Like they have it all. Like well-rounded beings. You know, you meet the white guys I dated. It was really hard for me to go back to dating white guys after that, because that's why they had a joke. They called us the mud sharks. You know, we dated the Black guys in college. They called us mud sharks because we went swimming in the mud. It was it's such a derogatory term.
Oh, that's terrible.
I'm like, okay, you have to make it derogatory about everything. But that's why a lot of women who start dating Black guys can't go back to dating white guys. They say, you know, once you go Black, you never go back because you realize that they are a superior race. And
well, and some of the best people. Yeah. I always had friends. One of my best friends in school was Black. All my friends were usually either Black or Latin or something. And then even my ex-husband, he got remarried and he married a Black lady, and she was just from God. She was so wonderful. She was the nicest lady I think I've ever met in my life. And people would ask me dumb, stupid questions like, how do you feel about your kids having a Black stepmom? I'm like, are you actually stupid? Like what would I feel any kind of way about it? I mean, like, I don't really care if she's good to my kids, which she was wonderful. And she's actually nice to me. Like, I'm grateful for her, you know, like you want more people to love your kids if you're smart, you know, if they're a good person, that's all I care. But I would get people ask me this dumb stuff and I'm like, you are so weird. And then I would look at them and say, you do know my niece is Black, right? And they're like, oh, sorry. And I'm like, my mom's also married to a half Native and half Latin person. Yeah. And then my sister married a half Polynesian, half Chinese. And I'm like, you probably don't want to talk race with me. Yeah. Like, it's not going to go well for you.
Well, all the white guys I dated after, well, my very next boyfriend, he was Cambodian, and he was little. So I went from a big, huge black football player to a little Cambodian skater boy. And every guy I dated after that was so jealous of this football player that I had dated, you know, like not, I shouldn't say jealous, but just felt inferior.
It's intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's intimidating.
For good reason. But you know, it's fascinating because it's not a racism thing. It's just human observation. If you just open your eyes and observe, like it's incredibly different, the Gentile white way and being than the black culture. It's incredibly different. And so it makes a lot of sense with what you're saying. You know, if you look at the fallen who come down and lay with men, and they're light beings, right? And so it would make sense that if man was originally dark, then they would come down and turn the skin lighter.
Right. To be
even
opposite.
Noah, when Noah was born, I believe it was Noah, in the book of Enoch, I think is where it talks about it. I can't remember for sure. But
yeah, I think so. I think it was.
When he was born, you know, his family was freaking out because they're like, whoa, what is going on? This kid, he's so light, you know, like he looks like one of the angels, you know. And I think they were like, is he fallen? And it almost makes me think, because Noah came, but it says he was perfect in his way. It's almost like the same way I have these weird prophetic tattoos, you know, that are like the reverse, almost like it was a prophecy. Okay, you're going to come with your perfect genetics, but you're going to be the one who's going to build the boat and be saved out of and drown all the white giant Gentile hybrid Nephilim, you know,
the opposite. Yep, that's true.
Do you like how I've just started using the term Gentiles interchangeably with Gentile?
I know. I'm like, well, it would be interesting to even find out, like we've discussed, like what, like when did it become like this superior thing to be something that's actually a minority? It's actually a minority. The white race is a minority compared to all the other races of the world.
Well,
there's so
that makes sense, because when the elite 13 bloodline family serpent seeds came down and started being like, well, I want to take over God's throne, and the original Hebrew, God's Israelite people, you know, we got to be, let's enslave them, let's put them in cages, let's, you know, build ourselves up. And that's what a serpent does. I mean, it makes perfect sense why. Because the inverse of everything, they've inverted everything, you know. And so
it's true. Yeah, whatever is up, they want down. So it wouldn't surprise me one single bit. Not that we're doomed as a race or anything. It just makes it's an interesting observation, knowing that
you're inferior.
That and that we have been lied to. Like, I guess I never felt superior in general, you know, but like that people think that. And I'm like, of course that makes complete sense, because like you said, the inversion of everything. So I don't doubt that for 1 minute at all. Yeah.
So what do you how do you think the red hair plays into it?
Oh, so I know that there's like Nephilim is a lot of times identified with red hair, you know, or like darker blonde hair, hazel eyes, green eyes, all these things.
Did your family ever talk about that amongst your family?
Not so much about the hazel thing, just only green eyes and red hair. And that was like the two jokes. But
what did they say about it?
Just that they would be like, you know, that's Nephilim, because I have green eyes, and they would be like, oh, you know, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I was too little. I was like 8. I was like, okay, that's weird, you know, or your grandma was, because she had the special blood. And I was like, okay. And I mean, my family would joke about this so much. And even my mom to this day, she still will say funny little things. And I'm like, nope, that's not good. Nope.
What do they say about the red hair?
Just that it was a trait of the Nephilim.
Okay.
So, but I always had a natural attraction for them, which would make sense if it's something like in your actual DNA makeup.
To redheads?
To redheads, that you were saying, like, you know, how they want to keep their bloodlines or whatever. So maybe that's something in us that like makes us, like how you choose your partner, what you think's attractive, whatever. Well, and, you know, but I also dated black guys and all that too. So I mean, I'm like, either I like them really light or really dark. It's like one or the other. But
I was so similar. And it's really interesting too, because and it's weird because and I don't mean this in any sort of rude way, but the guys that I liked that had red hair, I wasn't actually physically attracted to them. There was just something about them that drew me in that was really oddly mysterious, and it was different with each one of them, but there's something definitely when it comes to not looks, but their being different about them.
Well, and even at nursing, they say, oh, he's a redhead, he's going to need more medicine. Oh, they're a redhead, they're going to have a harder time. Oh, they're a redhead, get ready for tons of blood because they bleed more than everybody. I mean, they have problems that are weird.
Yeah.
You know, and so we always would joke, but like we were serious. If we would see a redheaded woman coming in to have a baby, we're like, uh-oh, better make sure they have 6 packs of blood for her, you know?
Yeah.
And it was always a thing.
Yeah.
It was really odd. And
there's
medications don't work on them.
There's absolutely something to be said about all that. You know, okay, so when it comes to green eyes, if you go and look up like what's fascinating about green eyes in the occult or why people are drawn to that, they say that the witches, natural witches, occult witch, like have green eyes, or that they draw.
I'm screwed.
Witchy witch.
I know.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Or a bad witch. I'm not a witch at all.
That's right.
Mine are like that. And I used to think I was clear of it because mine are green and yellow. And I used to think, see, I'm clear of it because they're kind of yellow too. And then I read something that said like hazel eyes are even more. And I was like, well, damn it.
Oh, how funny. My mom has hazel.
Ah.
Well, so the green eyes, you have that, you have the witchy thing, and then they're also just incredibly rare. And a lot of people who are in the occult or bloodlines that I know also used to talk about, I want to marry a redhead, or it was almost like there was something they knew, because I knew it wasn't because it's not like,
or what if it was that weird
offense,
natural?
It's not like, oh, they're just really beautiful, I'm attracted to them, because it's not usually a physical attraction thing. It's like they knew there was something mystical or something about them. So if you go and you study this, because I've tried to do a lot of research, and you can only find so much, because there are certain things that occult means secret. They're just going to keep secret. They're not going to tell you why they're drawn or raise up or praise the redhead, or when you get one, it's like this golden child. And there's also another reason it's in mainstream society that it's termed and given negative, like they call, oh, he's the redheaded stepchild of the family. Like, oh, or
my mom used to say, I'd rather be dead than have red on my head.
Oh, wow.
And what's funny is well, not my first husband. He had brownish auburn hair, but the other husbands that I've had and had children with both were very redheaded redheads, like freckles, the whole deal. Yeah. Red.
Well, so what I feel like it points to, if you look at the research on incest, it is a marker of incest. And so when you go, why would these bloodlines be drawn to wanting them for certain purposes, to play certain roles within bloodline families, Illuminati roles that they assign out? And why do they praise that and look for that? And I feel like
my husband's gonna hate this.
Sorry, husband. We love you. It's don't take it personal, but we've got to get the truth out there.
Yes.
That there is a point, and like, again, everybody's redeemable. This isn't everybody. This is why the occult looks and goes, oh, we want this, or we look for this.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
And so, if you understand the mind of the serpent, which is the more inverted the perversion, the better. And when you get to a level of incest where you kick out a redhead, say you have 2 brown-haired people, or a brown and a blonde, and they keep incest for many generations, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's no red hair, and you get a redhead. And now it's like, oh, this prized possession, because the incest was so strong, and we've created this like anomaly almost, And so I think that's why it got a bad rap, being the redheaded stepchild. And I think that's the reason they look for them for certain roles, because at a certain point, they're favorable to these bloodline families, because they've had so much incest on the bloodline. We've done so much abomination. We've produced this child now that has more ability to do something nefarious, because that's what they're looking for with these gifts. That's why they do the gifted testing and the schooling and all that. They're looking for gifts and abilities to serve the kingdom of darkness. And if they're a prized possession, then the reason that they're looking for that is because they're really good at nefarious something. You know, we've washed the goodness out of the bloodline to the point where, you know, we're left with this one that like can serve us. Yeah. In some sort of way that's dark for their purposes. And it's a sign. It's a sign of something.
It's funny that you mentioned that with my parents. They only had me, not any other kids together. But they both, my dad had black hair and brown eyes and brown skin, and my mom has brown hair, brown eyes, and brown skin, and they popped me out. And I was like, what's up? Yeah. And I always felt weird. Like, luckily I do look like my family, or I would have probably felt I was adopted. Like, I felt very I didn't fit, you know?
Yeah. Well, and then the redheaded thing also, what I noticed when I was being gang stalked by witches and Freemasons, when I realized who my family was and took off, that whole week, all of the people who came around me with witchcraft symbols on their cars, and all of the people who God revealed to me in my upbringing who were witches, and all of the witches who were trying to have me killed in ceremonies by getting me out of my body when we were doing the indigenous medicine ceremonies that I was going to in my shamanic training. They all, everyone who was revealed to me in my family bloodline, in ancestry, in my wards growing up, who were the witches of the group, all were people who would dye their hair red.
Oh, wow.
They all had they weren't natural redheads,
right? They
dye their
to
hair
be
red. And so they raise up that red hair for some reason. And I think it has something to do with blood, because my shamanic teacher, she was a blood magic witch. She did blood magic, and she would paint with her period blood on her drum.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, when you're involved in blood ritual, when you sacrifice children for power to be a witch, you know, there's a lot that it can point to, that they're not going to just come out and tell the mainstream. You know, I think there are people who are probably speaking out who know more about that. If you're watching this and you know something about it, reach out and
let us know.
The red genetic in the bloodlines, you know.
Wow.
And it happens it happens in darker skin too. They can end up, you know, with a redhead child, or
Latin people can have redheaded kids. I've seen it happen. And you're like, oh,
and who knows if it's because of incest, because, you know, a lot of that research is kept within the sciences of those 13 bloodlines who do the breeding and the genetic testing, because they're not always going to tell us what it is that they're looking for in that testing. Because I know that's huge in Utah, and it's not mainstream.
Oh yeah, with familysearch.org and all that.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it goes right back to that necromancy. I mean, they want to make sure all those names are covered, and it makes you wonder what exactly, like, if you think about the baptismal font for the baptisms of the dead, and it's oxen, but then there's a bull, so like a belly, and it totally reminds me of Moloch and sacrificing kids to the belly of the beast. It totally does.
Oh,
it's
belly.
Creepy. Yeah, it looks like a belly.
The belly,
yes, and the oxen.
I took a pic. I have a picture of that, which we'll get it. We'll share more pictures in another one. But that's interesting because I have a picture of that I was going to share.
Creepy.
And you know, it is so odd when you've only studied the Book of Mormon and grew up Mormon, and then you go and you read the Bible and it talks about necromancy. And then you realize that you go into the temple and you carry dead people's names in your hand through the temple. It's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, what were we doing? You know? And I think what that does, like, why is that? Why would they do that? And what is the purpose of, you know, if you're not really baptizing people for the dead, why are the Mormons so obsessed with this?
Well, we're going back to that necromancy of a Brack, I think. And
especially if they don't actually, if it's run by serpents and started by serpents and created by serpents, and the ceremony is an Antichrist ceremony, why are they baptizing the dead? if it's not to save the dead to send them to heaven, you know.
Well, and that Abraxas is a serpent on the bottom, 2 snakes on the bottom
right.
too. So I think it all ties in. I think it all ties into something way bigger than we know. Like I would love to
and
know,
I think
but
what they're doing with that is when you go in with a dead name, you're entering into a covenant with that spirit. But if the dead actually just go to sleep and they're, you know, in jail
waiting,
or in prison or whatever, you know, whatever they're actually doing on the other side, if they're not actually the one, you know, when people call up an ancestor or whatever and they say, well, that's not actually your ancestor, that's a demon, they appear that way,
right?
what they are is
If
a
it's
familiar
a familiar
spirit.
yes, the familiar spirit.
And familiar familial
Yep.
familiar, so they're familiar to you, but that doesn't mean they're actually family. They're familiar with you because Satan's been studying you since the beginning of time and knows, you know, how to send these beings out to appear in this way.
Yes.
So if you're going in and getting baptized for the dead, is what's really happening. I believe that they are hooking you up with familiar spirits, which is
it
cursing,
could be,
you know.
yeah.
And you think you're
bloodline
hearing the
stuff.
Holy Ghost. You think you're hearing the Holy Ghost, but how do you know you're not just carrying around familiar spirits with you that are one always talking to you? Because you have the Kundalini.
Well, and you
You've been
opened it up
baptized
and made a
under. You've been
pact.
given
Yeah.
by the laying on of hands. You've been given the gift of the Kundalini Holy Spirit, which is the false Holy Spirit. You know,
That's true.
The mimic, because you're not getting the real
The
Holy
real.
Spirit when you're baptized.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Because you're not even baptized to God. You're baptized into their church. That's literally the words. I mean, you're baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ
say?
of Latter-day Saints. Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm like, I always thought about that later. I was like, well, what triggered it for me was my husband and I were going to invite my mother-in-law to our daughter's baptism. And he said, don't do it. They're Mormon. They don't like our stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do it because I was trying to, you know, I don't know, be nice. And she said, well, you're getting her baptized. And I said, yeah. And she goes, into what? And I said, well, to God. And she was like, oh. And it made me step back and think like oh yeah, they do get baptized into the church. That is what they do. They are not getting baptized by anything that's biblical at all. Yeah. And so it's interesting to what they're doing to add to their numbers. Yeah. It really makes you wonder.
It keeps coming to me because I got to remember, because I didn't finish in the last episode that we did.
Oh, the Nephi.
The Nephi, yeah. So you've got, you know, this prophet in the Book of Mormon named Nephi, and his people called the Nephites, which that covenant, supposedly the covenant of the good people, because it went back and forth between the Nephites and the Lamanites, and the Lamanites were the evil ones, and the Nephites were, and then it gets really confusing because.
And by the way, they're brown. The Lamanites are brown, just so y'all know.
Yeah, and originally they were the evil ones, but then it was sometimes they were good and sometimes they were evil, and it just gets so convoluted, and it's like, how do you keep that all straight, you know? But so you've got the Nephite. Okay, the word Nephite comes from Nephilim. So Nephi, Nephilim, Nephite, the word neophyte, NEOPHYTE. If you go look that word up, and neophyte in the Freemason Brotherhood is a new initiate into Freemasonry. And you probably won't find it. I know I've read this somewhere. I don't know. I've had to search really hard, and the internet keeps erasing stuff. So you're not going to maybe find this anymore. I don't know. But definitely a neophyte is a newly initiated sodomite. And what is a sodomite? A sodomite is somebody who's had their mind shattered open through the ritual of sodomy. Wow. And the reason that they do that is because they want to illuminate the spiritual gift, and that puts in the Kundalini Holy Spirit or a Nephilim spirit host into the body in order to run, you know, the satanic agenda through a human temple. And so you've got the Nephite, the neophyte, and then something that hit me the other day is, you know, in the Matrix, everybody's like, yeah, wake up, the Matrix. It's all about, you want to take the red pill or the blue pill. Well, Neo, his name is Neo.
Yeah.
So that points to that he may be a neophyte. So
Oh.
maybe the way that Neo awakened was the Kundalini. And
Mm.
those little pills, everything in the brotherhoods is phallic. All the
Mm-hmm.
symbols are phallic. So he got initiated. He woke up through a little red phallic pill.
Yeah, that's weird.
Or did he have his mind shattered open by, is he a neophyte and
Yeah.
he had a sodomy ritual, and is it pointing to all of these things in mysticism that you have no idea? All these
Mm.
symbols are all over. You go watch Joe Rogan and you think, oh, he's wide awake. He's doing ayahuasca and all of these things. And it's like, yeah, that's a Kundalini. You know what it says to me when a man walks around with every podcast show that I watch, when they have the third eye up there, I just think, oh, that dude's just going to tell everybody he's a sodomite. Like,
Mm.
and they think, oh, well, I did mushrooms to open it. Well, did you?
Yeah.
Or did you receive a mushroom
Oh,
in
yeah.
one of the gateway
Ah.
entrances into your body?
Well,
Because
and they talk about sex magic in the occult for a reason, because it's super powerful. Like Aleister Crowley got kicked out of 2 different countries for all his crap. And he was very into sex magic, and not just the kitty stuff. Like, I mean, in general,
yeah,
he knew there was a lot of power with it. But not only he, but Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and the stuff they were doing in the desert, that was sex magic. John Dee, they were wife swapping, all this stuff. And with Joseph Smith, it was more the polygamy. And same thing for Muhammad, who saw Gabriel again with polygamy. So
mm-hmm.
every time there's some sexual
Yeah,
corruption of
yeah.
how it's supposed to be.
And that's what the Nephilim do. That's what the fallen do, is come and introduce you to different brands of sex magic. What's your flavor? And it doesn't matter what your flavor is, because even in my own family's bloodline and the groups, I can feel and read and intuit somebody's flavor. It doesn't mean that they don't have to be with a child or be in an orgy or be in a whatever, but whatever they
Right.
present on the forefront, their flavor that they prefer is maybe what they would live. Like those who are living, occult practices more in the open, like, oh yeah, we're
Mm-hmm.
polygamous, or oh yeah, we're polyamorous, so we participate in
This
group
is,
swinging
yeah.
stuff together. Or then there's the ones who are just vile, and that these people like are pedophiles. Or then there's the ones who just like want a million wives. That doesn't mean they're not
Right.
still initiating their sons who are born into the same power that they have through sodomy rituals. And it also doesn't mean that that's their flavor, that they prefer it or like it, because you have different people who have different addictions, within these bloodlines and cults, and within Mormonism. I've seen it all over the place. You have people who are just really want the power of a child because they're so wounded they don't know how to have a normal relationship with a woman or a man, and so they just go for the children. You have the man who loves and is power hungry and just wants a whole bunch of wives, because the man that I cheated on my husband with, he was a polygamist.
Mm.
Lived it for years. And so I have personal experiences with many of these people. The woman who taught me about the new and everlasting covenant in Mormonism, she was polyamorous, and she'd been polyamorous for years. She had many spiritual husbands and wives. And I know many people who have lived these things and watched it practiced out in my personal life. And so, and I've seen their secret flavors and their front flavors, or the things
Mm.
that you realize are just part of the rituals. And
Right.
there are people's homes that I've been in where it's very clear there's incestuous pedophilia energy going on with their kids, and their kids are messed up kids, and that
Mm.
something's going on and that they've been abused. That doesn't mean they're into that, but it's just part of what you learn in those bloodlines.
Yeah.
And
They do it on purpose
everybody
to
gets
make
it.
them, yeah, to make
Yeah,
their
because
mind split.
that's where that power comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there's some who are just power hungry and love the money. And that's what you see, what I feel like you see with a lot of the men in the comedy industry, in the music industry, in the Hollywood industries. These men, you would never guess, they don't act gay at all. But as soon as
Mm-mm.
you see them coming out, in the dress, and they've done the humiliation ritual by having to put the dress on, that tells you, hey, I just had to go through a sodomy ritual. I advanced. I'm a neophyte.
Mm-hmm.
And the Book of Mormon's talking about Nephites who are white and
Yeah.
delightsome. Sounds like a
No
bunch of
kidding.
Nephilim sodomites, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's so
You know,
strange. I never even thought of that.
Yeah, so it's fascinating when you really start to put all of the pieces of the puzzle together. And so why is
And if you even
Mormonism
think of
Antichrist?
layman,
Oh yeah.
the lay man, like a normal man,
Mm-hmm.
layman, you know, like
Or your
that,
laying men that like
or
to
that
get laid
too.
by other men
Yeah, that too. That could
who
be
are
it
lame.
too.
Lame.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always these little like term, like even the angel Moroni, when Cody was talking about him and his weird ugly smile that he got after like Joseph came
Mm-hmm.
and knelt down and worshiped him, this creepy smile. Like moron, the word moron is in his
I
name. I
know.
think
I
God kind
always
of gives
say
these
that.
silly like
Oh,
God's just out there giggling like, well, I left a trail of breadcrumbs, so just figure it out, um so Antichrist, let's talk about why Mormonism is Antichrist and where
okay.
the signs of that are when people go, no, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Well, it's another
Yeah.
Jesus. It says in the Bible, anyone who teaches another Jesus, I mean, it's not Jesus Christ. So
Well,
what
and
do
you're
you
not supposed to add to the Bible, take away from the Bible. You're not supposed to, they do like all the things that you're basically told, like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. And then they do it. And then they say, well, it's different because we're us.
yeah, and
And so,
go look in the scriptures, that go look up in the Bible where it says, um, God does not reside in temples made with human
temples.
hands.
Yep. Yep.
And then wonder why the heck you're building billion-dollar temples, with gold statues on the
And
top.
going and being told to go there all the time.
Yeah, don't
And
tell me you don't
all
worship
this. Yeah.
angels. You put angels,
Yep.
you don't see hardly any Christ imagery. On top of your temple is an angel. They are telling you by putting a golden idol on top of your temples that when you go in there, you are worshiping the fallen. You are doing necromancy under direction of the
Mm-hmm.
fallen who gave these Freemason rituals in order to connect you with familiar spirits. And
Yep.
then you've got the movie. So the Garden of Eden story from the Bible has its own little Joseph, Brigham, whoever, twist on the way they wrote what happened in Genesis. It's a little different than what you read in Genesis.
Yeah.
But Lucifer, so we'll get into this in another episode. We'll go more into
Mm-hmm.
the depth of this, but pulling out some of the lines from this movie. So there's a whole, like, what would you say is a half hour?
It's like a 2 hour,
No,
the
just the
full
movie.
ceremony. Oh, just the movie. Yeah, probably like 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, and it's the whole Genesis. And genes. You were talking about genes and where our genes
Mm-hmm.
came from. And it's, when Peter, James, and John come down, like, is that even in the Bible? Peter, James, and John coming and visiting.
No, no. God was just
See,
creating.
I'm still trying to sort it out,
Yeah.
like
God,
trying to still flush some stuff
and
down the
they
toilet.
always, this is what I always say about Mormonism. Like Mormonism is a one-upper. Like they one up everything. Like if you have one heaven, they have three heavens. If you have one story about creation, they got three other people coming.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
got more hell, they got more places, they got more gods, they got more people. And I'm always like, they're one-uppers. That's what it is. They're one-uppers.
Yeah, elitist Nephilim
Oh,
neophyte
yes.
sodomites who are the
Yes.
best.
Oh
They
my
have the
gosh.
best religion that has way more than
Hmm.
every other religion. I actually
Yep.
just posted this to your point yesterday, saying, dude, Mormonism is on a whole other level of wicked evil, which is why I was saying earlier, they are the great and abominable church, the whore of all the
Yes.
earth, because they have so much false truth, so much of real truth that they have counterfeit and twisted and turned and entangled in lies.
Hmm.
And what Lucifer calls that in the little Mormon temple movie that we're talking about, the Mormon temple movie of the scene that plays out in the Garden of Eden, he says, so Peter, James, and John, and let's just point to this. I think what the Peter, James, and John piece is I think that points to that the Nephilim are coming down and falsely inserting themselves into the book of Genesis.
Oh,
Because it's
okay.
not there. And these
Because
are
they
supposed to
can't
be,
create, so they want to mimic. Yeah.
yeah, so they're just like pulling stuff. Like if you read the Book of Mormon, people are like, well, this is in the Book of Mormon. It's in the Bible too. It's like, yeah, he copied it. He went and took a bunch of stuff out of
Hmm.
the Bible and put it in the Book of Mormon. It doesn't, that the Bible was already there. It's called a counterfeit.
Right. Yes.
So you've got Peter, James, and John coming down to check on Adam and Eve to see how they're doing on assignment from God. And they're like, oh, what Lucifer, what are you doing here in the garden? And he says, oh, I'm teaching them. Well, and he was giving them signs and tokens. He was teaching Adam and Eve signs and tokens, which is interesting because we give signs and tokens in the temple. And in the movie, the one who is presenting the signs and tokens is Lucifer.
Is the devil.
Okay. So he's giving them signs and tokens, and Peter, James, and John say, what are you doing here? And he says, oh, I'm teaching them precepts of men mingled with scripture, which is a counterfeit false teaching.
Right.
Okay. From the devil. So he's telling you right there, the temple is full of signs of it being Antichrist and a Luciferian religion. And it's all over in the movie. And the movie's only for the elite, because once not elite, but worthy, because once you've washed all of these things away, only certain people can go in. And really it's just like who's taken the most manipulate, the most mind control, and is willing to come and take this lamb's wool over your eyes, because the women wear a veil over their face, which would be a symbol of like the lamb's wool in the Freemasonry. You're being blinded. So he says precepts of men mingled with scripture. So that's telling you that the Mormon religion, the man who gives you these signs and tokens, teaches you precepts of men, which are just ideas of men that he makes up that are not from God, mingled with Bible. He's taken things out of the Bible. And this is what I feel like all of the channeled works are. It's like, well, there's some truth in it, and it validates what it says in the Bible. The Quran or that talks about Jesus. This book, the Krishna, talks about, it's like, well, yeah, because the Bible and those truths like have always been there. So we got to borrow some of this and then twist it up with a bunch of lies. And so then you've got the point in the movie where Satan, it's so weird because he totally goes rogue on like ancient Genesis time and turns around and looks at the whole audience of the people who are there, like taking out their own endowment, being endowed. What are you being endowed with? Right. When you go in and, you receive this temple garment and come into this endowment session where you're endowed with power of Freemason tokens. And he turns and looks at the audience, and Lucifer in the video looks right in the eye of all the patrons that are sitting in the temple who are dressed in these like weird ass robes and clothes. And the men have a tassel on their hat that's like the graduation, like you graduate from high school and wear that same thing and move the tassel to the other side. They do that in high school graduation. Why are you doing that in a Mormon temple ceremony? You need to do that to get into heaven. The same thing you do in a graduation ceremony at high school. It's just stupid. And so he turns and he looks at the audience and he says, if these people in this temple on this day don't live up to these covenants, these blood covenants that you're making, these oaths and tokens and signs of exactness, which is an oath of exactness, the Mormon magic underwear garment is a compass and a square on the nipples that are worn. And then what's on the knee?
The ruler. Yep. The sideways ruler.
It's like a ruler that you measure with.
Yeah, for the Masons.
So everything's being measured, right? We're measuring everything. We measure with a compass, we measure with a square, we measure with a ruler. And where's the mercy and grace in that? It completely undoes what God did. What
it takes us backward. Yes, it takes us back to the old times.
There's no mercy and grace. Died. Yeah. Well, even then they had animal sacrifice, which was pointing to that. That was still forgiveness of their sins. This is no forgiveness of your sins. This is not forgiveness of your sins, which is why you go into a Mormon bishop and you tell him, and he's like, yeah, you can't take the sacrament. Right. And yeah, you're going to go and not take the sacrament in front of everybody, and your sins aren't necessarily forgiven. And I'm your judge and jury, and you're going to sit and feel guilty about this for the next 20 years of your life. How does that feel? That's Antichrist. That's not Jesus. Okay. I've gone it. I repent all the time. And when Jesus forgives my sins, it's immediate. And he also comes and shows me my heart and fills me with love and forgiveness immediately when I go in repentance before God in my heart. And so he turns and he says, if these people on this day in this temple don't live up to these covenants, then they will be under my power, Lucifer. So right there, he's telling you, if you don't live a life of exactness under the compass and the ruler and the square of this oath of Freemasonry that you're taking, then you are under Luciferian power, which is why you have to renounce Mormonism. It has to be renounced because it is a curse of exactness where you will have little familiar spirits following you around, making you feel guilt constantly, and you do not know who the real Jesus is.
The first time I got out, and it was before I really got into like renouncing and all that, but it was just when I first got out and I went to a church and I understood about grace for the first time. Like, I had listened to a sermon. I just started not crying, weeping. It was like the dam broke on everything, because you feel constantly inadequate. And the inadequacy, I feel like it led me into sickness. I never felt more sick, fat, alone, scared, and tired in my life as when I was in Mormonism. I felt like I was never enough too. Like,
which is
no matter what.
Which is why Utah is the capital of antidepressants.
Depression.
In the country.
Yes. Yep. I agree. Because you never get to breathe. I mean, it's like you have to do more, and you have to do more, and you have to do more. And especially the women. I'm sorry. The men are on one level, but the women are brutal to one another.
Well, because my guess is a good 90% of the state, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, like, all these women are married to sodomites and they don't even know it. Yeah. Some of them do. Some of them do, and they're in on it. Some of them don't. Yeah. And a lot of these men get initiated into this, and their wives don't know if they weren't born into the bloodline of it. But you're dealing with a whole bunch of women who have men who are intermingling with each other in serpent, satanic ways that they have no clue. And their sons are being initiated into it, and their children and their husbands and their brothers. And a lot of these women don't even know the wiser, and they are just miserable. And they think that they're worshiping God. They think they're doing what's right. And it is so sad. So sad. You can't hear? Or what's going on?
Okay, it's on. It
died. You couldn't hear me?
Just for a second. I'm like, oh.
It was just.
It died.
It was your Bluetooth, or it was me? Okay.
No, I'm back. I switched it out because I was like, uh-oh. Okay, you were saying some women know that they are sodomites, and that's as far as I heard. Sorry about that.
That their husbands are, if they're born into it in the bloodline, they may know if they're participating in satanic ritual, that they see their husbands in that. But a lot of these women have no clue if their husbands are bishops and they weren't born into the bloodline, if they were expendable. I didn't know my husband was a sodomite. I didn't know.
I think you were so taught to be like, oh, he knows everything and I know nothing, and he's smart and I'm not, and he knows the way and I don't. So like, I don't know that I would have even ever questioned. And they have their secret meetings, and they have the priesthood stuff, and they have all this stuff all the time that they're gone. And, I know that they don't do that with everyone, because you have to get up there high enough where they trust you. So, because like some people will say to me, yeah, well, I know this and I was never that. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not just going to toss it out there. It's not going to be like every person.
Or is that okay? Even if, like you said, I know people who have been like, well, I was in that position, or I was in that calling, because certain callings in Mormonism, you have to be a Freemason to even, they're not going to put you in as a bishop if you're not going to keep, if a child comes in and says, my dad's abusing me, if a boy comes in and says, my dad's sodomizing me, they have to have a gatekeeper in order to shut that down, which is why they make sure all of the bishops are Freemasons. And so why would they put somebody in one of those positions if they're not that? And if somebody's telling you, well, I was that and I'm not that. Well, yeah, you took an oath to cut out your tongue if you said that you were part of it. So you're not going to tell me even if you are.
And I think they do that too, so that they'll have a lot of people that go, that never happened. I was there. You know what I mean? So that they can say, oh, well, that wasn't my experience. Because of course, it's just like, I was listening to a podcast before this today about the Philadelphia project. And they said, well, what did they do with the people that lived from that project? And they said, oh, they put them back out in society, because it looked better that they're just out there crazy than if we killed them.
What's the Philadelphia project?
Oh my gosh, it's like a huge, it was where they actually tried to zap a big naval boat from one place to another, like another place, using like zapping ability, and a whole bunch of the people
through
were
like a
mangled
portal,
and
like
yes,
open a
and it
portal and
was
like move
so
them from one
bad.
location to another.
And either the people died, were mangled, or completely screwed up the rest of their lives. Like they were never okay ever again. And then the ones that did remember, there was like a handful that did, they MK Ultra'd them and put them back into society, and made them think they had completely different lives and everything. Like they didn't go home to their wives. And it's really sad, but like they do this all the time. You know, controlled opposition is real and alive. They're not stupid. And one thing for sure, the Mormon church is not. They're wealthy and they're smart.
Yeah.
They're not stupid. And the person they do pray to, which isn't Jesus, it is a very strong spirit on this earth, because this earth is ruled by Satan. This isn't our home. We're not supposed to love it here, you know?
Yeah.
So
and he's been here since the beginning of time, you know, and he's gotten the wiser, because ever since the Nephilim got drowned the first time, because they were out in the open running around as giants, raping, eating, and pillaging humanity, then this time Lucifer's like, hey, buddies, you're like, we're going to have to go underground with this, because they're going to wipe us out again, because they know that God said, hey, you're illegal. This isn't okay. And humanity knows. So, hey, we're going to start doing secret handshakes, and we're going to start keeping this on the DL, and we're going to go build a bunch of tunnels underground and hide, make our own little cities and live in, you know, we can't be up here just roaming the earth with Adam's seed, because we're in a seed war.
Well, and don't you think it's weird? This is one thing I want to study too about, like, and I haven't done it yet, but I always wondered that, you know how, okay, in the days of Noah, they messed with our genetics by actual sex, but now they can do it in a lot of different ways, because if you get a donor, if you get, you don't know where all that stuff comes from. Let's be real. Like, you don't know where the baby egg came from. Okay. You don't. And so, and then on top of that, let's make it one more better. What the hell was up with all the orphan trains, and where the hell did all those babies come from? Because I'm real curious.
And while we're at it, why don't we just throw a little serpent DNA into this petri dish?
What
and when
if
I go put it in this
babies?
woman, let's just watch what happens if we throw a little serpent. Like, yeah, you give man your eggs and your seed, and who knows what that mad scientist is going to do in the lab with it, because you don't know that man. You don't know who his boss is. You don't know.
And they do weird occult things like the homunculus and all this weird stuff that they do. And I'm like, you think that they wouldn't have figured something out by now? They can make a baby, and they figured it out, that they knew, okay, put the baby's egg and the sperm in the dish and nothing happens. Nothing. They have to electrocute it. They have to zap it, because there's a spark of life, and they recreated it. Why did they know that? There are some wisdom and knowledge that we are not supposed to have. And that's also what got the angels in trouble. Okay. There's forbidden knowledge about a lot of things that we're not supposed to have. And I'm telling you, some of that is stuff that we would have never thought of. I'm sorry.
Well,
it's
and it's
not
because
within us.
Because God is God, and we're supposed to allow God to be God, and he is creator, and we're not supposed to counterfeit and mimic and fake and try to go sit on his throne and be creators of men the same way he was.
So what if they made all those babies, like you said, and like tweaked them and made those orphan trained babies all like that, because they got really good at artificial insemination after that time frame?
What are the orphan trained babies?
Oh my gosh, this is like a deep dive. We should do one on this. There were all these babies that just showed up out of nowhere at the World's Fairs, you know, the World Fairs.
Oh, yeah. I read a book
and
on
there's
that.
just all these babies that came out of nowhere, and they're like, come look at the babies in the incubators. And I'm like, where the hell are the parents? And they didn't have any. And they just had all these orphans, and the orphan trained babies were just given away. And I think they said some bullshit like, well, their parents got killed in war and blah, blah, blah. And it was a big thing. And they were giving these babies
them away to families, would just come and take them home.
And I'm like,
and they could have been totally genetically manipulated, created in a lab, sent out into
introduced into our humanity, to where we've made, I don't know how many there were. And I've always thought of that. And I'm like, you know, it's just, they figure things out. And so, of course, you know, they're going to get this knowledge from angels. They're going to.
And so, you know what that reminds me of is,
I don't mean good angels.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Amongst the Mormon communities, there's a lot of infertility as well. In mainstream Mormonism, not the FLDS, but you see it, rampant. And so there's a lot of adoption that happens, even to the point where the church, the LDS church, had their own
They'll
adoption
fund
agents.
it. Yeah.
And it did eventually get defunded, and I think there was some major messy shiz going on there.
Oh yeah.
But so when I was living in my RV traveling on the road, I was staying in all different places, and I was staying at this one place down in Heber, Utah. And I met this lady in the pool, it was so crazy. God just is so strategic with the way he plans everything. This doctor that I used to work with at the emergency room when I was 17, they were talking about him. Like, he has a very unique name, and he's gay, and his partner, like, I used to go to parties at their house, and we would sled down their driveway, and he would make beer and stuff. Like I knew this guy, and these old couples who were there vacationing in their RV were at the hot tub, and I'm just doing my own thing, over there with my eyes closed, trying to ignore all these weird old Mormons, because I'm like traumatized by Mormons, don't want to talk to anybody. But they would not quit talking about this doctor that I knew. And it was like, God was like, okay, are you going to say something yet? Because I was not talking to people at all during this phase of my life. I kept to myself.
Just get away from me. Yeah.
I finally say, oh, hey, I know Dr. So-and-so. And I said, are you talking about the guy that works in the emergency room in Ogden? And they're like, yeah. I said, I used to work with him when I was 17. They're like, really? He's our best friend. And I was like, really? And it was interesting because they were like these kind of old Jack Mormon couples, like, probably in their 60s or 70s. And one, because he's gay and drinks and ER doctor. So I'm like, that's really weird that you guys like are friends with this guy. They seem so out of like the kind
not
the kind of people who would be friends with each other. So I was talking to this lady, and I can't even remember I think I started telling her how my ex-husband had found out that he's half Iranian, and only in the past year, and got one of those genetic tests done, like the what is the one that the Mormon Church has?
Ancestry.
Yeah, Ancestry. He did. I don't know if he did 23andMe or that one. I can't remember, but he'd had that done. It came back that he was half Iranian. So we went and confronted his mom, like, hey, is there something you want to tell me? Because apparently my dad's not my dad.
Apparently I'm half Iranian.
And we grew up with him, that all of our friends would tease him and call him the mailman's son. And everybody would always be like, what ethnicity are you? Because he just looks so different than everybody. And I think he knew. I think he was probably bred, because a lot of the Muslims and the blondes, his mom looks kind of like you. She has those Nephilim features, and she's really light, fair skinned. I think she was originally redhead. A lot of her sisters are red hair. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this is a cover story. But so I'm telling this, I don't know how we got into it, but I'm sharing this story with them. And this older woman tells me, oh, I work in the ancestry library for the church. And she'd worked there for years. She takes calls and stuff. So she was like, you know what's really crazy with those tests, since the church has like released these ancestry tests to check your DNA. And, she's like, everybody's buying them for like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas. People will buy them for their whole family. And they'll go, oh, here's one for everybody. Everybody take a test. Let's see if it's all the same, if we all have the same genetics where we're from, because sometimes like one will say, oh, you're 23%,
whatever. Yeah.
Irish. Ukraine, and then your sibling says something else. So it's just wildfire. And she's talking about how crazy wild it is that this is going on at such a rampant number, that people are obsessed with these tests right now. And she says, the thing that's really crazy that's going on is we get these calls all the time. And she said, and it's happening in mass numbers, that these people take these tests and they come back and they find out that they are absolutely not even related to either of their parents. And these are like grown adults who are raised in their family of, they're not related to their family of origin.
That's crazy. Well, and how do they explain that away?
They don't. That's what she said. That's what she said. So crazy is they won't give an explanation, because you have all of these Freemason Nephilim sodomites walking around, and who are in these breeding programs of elitists, keeping their bloodlines, whatever. And who knows where they're getting these children from, if they're being created in petri dishes, if they're teen. They always get called a teen pregnancy. Oh, a teen pregnancy. And it's like, is it, or where did they actually come from? Or a lot of times I think what it is the breeding programs ritually abuse children, and then they take these children and then they place them in other families. But they're not explaining it. She says that's the thing that was so crazy about it, was they didn't have answers and the parents wouldn't give explanations. And it was just like this big silence.
Like it just happened. But they weren't adopted like they were born. They were born to these people, probably.
Well, they didn't explain any of it. She just said they just don't,
so
they
weird.
just won't tell them, a mass number. So what that points
so
to
that orphan train thing, I want you to take a guess. Okay, it happened from 1854 to 1929, which is not that long ago, bro. I want you to guess how many kids.
What do you mean it happened between that period? Like every time they would have the World Fair, they would bring these trains in.
They had this certain amount of kids that they were giving out, and guess how many there were between those years. I'm going to blow your mind.
How many? I have no idea.
250,000
random kids just brought in
that they adopted out, and they said they were from immigrants, but nobody knows.
Have they followed any of them? Wait. So I'm trying to figure. I thought you just meant it was just 1 year at this.
No,
it was several years at the World Fair.
Several years. So it says approximately 250,000 children between 1854 and 1929 were on the orphan trains and placed in loving adopted homes, paraded before prospective families, and treated like indentured servants. This happened in America. This is America.
Yeah, that's you
terrifying.
They could have been
terrifying
in a petri dish and in a false womb or something in a cow's womb.
We don't even know. What if it's all underground kids that they freaking made?
And they probably kept tabs on all of them. They probably kept
tabs. They know. That's what these ancestors. What do you think these ancestry tests
they're all
are
under
for?
MK Ultra, and they all.
What do you think they're looking for? What do you think they're
candidates.
looking for? Yeah, they're looking for all of the kids that were freaking passed out and trying to figure out what the hell happened. Probably.
Are any of them still alive? Do you know? I'm trying to think.
I don't know. I'm gonna Google it. But 1929. I mean, that's that would be 100. So probably not. But I mean,
gosh,
it just makes you know that this happened, and 250,000 people in America came from we don't know.
Wow.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's kind of terrifying to me, because that could account for some of the stuff like what you're saying. Like, did they just grab a kid and leave? Like, and now this is their posterity. You know what I mean? Who knows what? But like at the end of the day, we have no idea where those people came from. And like, I am a sucker and I am very mercy driven. I would probably take a kid home. Like I am super done that way, because I'm like, oh my gosh, they're suffering and sad. Like I've taken lots of kids home that were mine and taken care of them. But I mean, I knew where they came from though.
Well, the breeding programs, if you have Nephilim genetics, from what they say is that the pregnancy gestation for a Nephilim hybrid, I would believe probably, because it's kind of like it washes out in the blood. So the further out you get, if somebody comes and marries a normal human Adamic seed, child, and then it washes it out, then there's not going to be as strong as whatever. And so the closer you are to the original source of the fallen breeding with a human, they have these Nephilim babies, and the gestation is only like a 4-month pregnancy. And so it's wow. And then they grow really fast, and then they take them into hiding and raise them up to a certain point. And then what they often do is bring them back and they have them marry their own mother.
Wow.
And, because of their obsession with the incest. Right. And so that's where you get into this crazy stuff going on. And if you're putting seed like that out into humanity, they're breeding, they could have been breeding, these people.
250,000 people is a lot of freaking people. And I'm like, how did that just go by back then? Even back then, that's a weird story. Like, you're just going to go to the fair and you're going to go see some crap at the fair. And you're like, oh, look, there's all the babies for sale. Like, what?
The World Fair is the weirdest thing on the planet.
The World Fair is some shady shit. I'm telling you.
The book that I read when I read this book, I can't remember what it was called. The book
Do
that
you
I
know
read,
what
it was about a murderer who was frequenting the
I
World
know
Fair
who
and
you're
hiding.
H whatever his name was. I can't remember his name, but he was rich. Yeah.
So just the descriptions of how they would go and build these entire cities just to tear it down is
But
like,
did they? But did they, or did they lie about it? And it was remnants of the old world, like Tartaria shit. Because I think the Mormon temple was already here. I think it's horse shit that they built that with a bunch of horses and little crap. And I've seen old pictures of it. And when they're building it, and it's already mostly all the way done, they're just adding the top.
what, the Nauvoo temple?
No,
What
the one in
temple?
Salt Lake Temple. I'll send you
Oh,
some pictures where there's no way. The quarry blocks alone, I'm
oh,
it's like the Egypt pyramids. I feel like a lot of things were here and they covered it up by the World's Fair saying they were knocking things down because the buildings weren't sturdy. But if you go to San Francisco, they didn't knock all of them down. Some of them still existed. And then what they didn't knock down with the World Fair crap, they knocked down with fires afterward. If you noticed in all these major cities later, they would have some freaking fire that would wipe crap out completely. It's mind
wait. So
boggling.
did they have a World Fair in Utah?
They traveled it. Yes, it was everywhere. Like they would travel this World Fair all over the place to all these major cities. But
But
I
there
don't
was
know if
one
they came to, I
recorded being
don't know if they came to here, but I think that building was already here.
the
Like
Salt Lake
not
City temple.
associated with the World's Fair, just in general. I think it was here. Because there's all this old world stuff if you travel in other countries, like in Rome. I've been to Rome, I've been to Paris. They have these beautiful things that are still there. And what does America have? We don't have stuff like that. It's all torn down. It was
And
leveled.
the talk about the church tour you went on in Rome, what they have going
Oh
on
my
under the
gosh, that
churches
was
there.
the creepiest shit ever. Okay, so in Rome, we went on, and we were not supposed to be there. This is, I will first say to people, be with God. Like I was not as much with God then as my walk is now. Nowadays, I don't think I would have been tricked so easily. But back then, I was still very, when you're a Mormon, I feel like you come out, or when you're even in, when you first are there or whatever, it's kind of like always like, oh, this famous person, and oh, that I feel like it's like Kardashians sometimes. Like it's stupid, you know. And so
The
this
who's
guy came to
who's,
me.
the keeping up with the
Yeah,
Joneses, the
yeah,
elitists, the game
it's
of
so bad.
elitism.
Like, what is their blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. And even their temple bags, their main brand for the temple bags is called Symbols. How hilarious. Anyways, long story short, I go to Rome and this dude comes up to me and he's very handsome, big, jacked up guy. And I'm like, what do you want? Like, get away from me. And he's like, no, I do these tours. And look, I'm famous. And look at this girl. And I did Khloe Kardashian last week, or Courtney, excuse me, Courtney. He shows me all the
Took her
pictures
on
and
a
I'm like,
tour.
yeah. And he's like, you should come. And I'm like, my husband is in a sandwich shop and he will murder you. Like, you need to move along, you know? And he's like, no, I'm not weird like that. I'm like, okay. And so then he's like, no. So that's why he was showing me pictures. Like, really, I do tours, you know? And so we were like, okay, maybe. And my daughter was with me and she's in her 20s. And so we're like, she's like, yeah, mom, let's go on the tour. Like, you know, she's single. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, okay, my husband comes back. He's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, it's cheap. He said he would do it for super cheap. And he's like, yeah, right. He's famous. He's going to do it for cheap. I'm like, I don't know. He said he'd do it for $50, you know? He's like, that doesn't even make sense. So I should have been smarter, but I wasn't. And so he takes us on this tour and it was actually awesome tour. It was really, really good. But he takes us in all these back areas, like back things you wouldn't, they're off the beaten path. It wouldn't be a church you ended up in. There's a lot of churches there, but it wouldn't have been one of the churches I would have picked to go look at. It's very small and significant. So we go in it and he's like, oh yeah, and this used to be a temple. And you can come downstairs. And so we go down. I don't even know if we're supposed to be down there, like, but we did. And so we go down the stairs and stuff and we get done. And Like we go have dinner with him and the people all go together to this little old lady. And I swear to you, she was like 100. She like straight up looked like she came out of a storybook, like, or something with the old Italian stuff on. I mean, it just like really. And then they took us in a tour underground. That was underground to go down to the temple thing. And then it also underground into this cellar thing that they were showing us, like where her restaurant was. It was super creepy. And I was like, oh, this is weird. So we eat, we leave, whatever. And he even said, do not ask what is on the menu. This screws me up now. He's like, do not ask what's on the menu or what you're being served or whatever. You get what you get. She just cooks it. And I'm scared at this point because I'm deathly allergic to a whole bunch of things. Okay, like rice and shellfish, and like I have my EpiPen, but I was scared. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And so he's like, so my husband's tasting everything first, trying to like make sure I'm not gonna die. And then he's like, no, I think there's no shellfish, blah blah blah. So anyway, we eat and then we take a picture with them and everything, and then we leave. And like later, 1 year, full year later, my husband says, we'd had all these problems with my daughter and she estranged from our family and it was just horrible. She's still estranged. It's been 4 years. And he says, you will never believe, because this is when I'm like fully into conspiracies now. I tell him everything. He's listening, blah. And so he goes, guess what that church was called? I did a check-in. I'm like, what? And he's like, it was the Temple of Minerva. And I just stared at him. I was like, what? And
Which
he goes,
is?
And Minerva is a god, and Poseidon is her husband. And Medusa was, this is the story goes, was in her temple, that temple, worshiping her when Poseidon decides to go cuckoo crazy and rape her in the temple. And the backlash from Minerva was to give her a head full of snakes because she was beautiful and he wanted her like that. And that wasn't even that girl's fault, you know? So she gets the snakes and that's the story. So right before we had gone to Rome, my daughter had been raped. And so this was like, and she speaks out about it. So I just want to tell people that like she's not shy about that part. So and about surviving and all that. Or I would not share that. And then so she had that happen to her. And then we went on vacation right after that, not knowing any of that stuff that I told you, in California in the redwood forest. And she sits up in the middle of the night, like at 3 a.m. and sits straight up. And this has happened to my kids, not to me, and says, Minerva, no, and like lays back down. Why something's trying to come in this cabin out in the middle of the woods, because I'm up trying to figure out where the bear is or something, because I can hear something pounding to get in there. And my kids are hysterical. They're like, wasn't that funny? Because they're like 9, 9 and 10 or something. And they're just like laughing. So the whole rest of the vacation, the reason why I remembered it is because the kids every 5 minutes are like, Minerva, no. Like they think it's hilarious. And so they tease her. Well, next thing I know, not quite a year later, we're cut off. She had met that guy, a new guy, and everything. And I'm like, fully under the feeling that she doesn't necessarily have a spirit in her, but an attachment on her that has completely helped her cut off our family. It is so weird. And it's not just one person. It's
And
everyone.
the point is that those types of things can happen just from say you go on a tour, you're taken down to an old sex ritual temple.
We went underground.
Let me also mention that I don't believe mythology is mythology. They call it mythology
No,
because they don't
they're
want
angels.
to know that the ancient truths of these Nephilim who and the way these fallen gods did things, and so they've turned it into mythology. If you go to Greece, I've heard people talk about how in Greece, so if you go talk to them about Greek mythology, they're like, why do you call it mythology? We were raised in those were our
Those
history
are the
classes.
gods. Yeah.
That's true.
And I think so. I think so.
Yeah, so if you're going to a fallen god's temple and you go underground and then you have some weird, maybe Minerva came out and cooked you dinner.
Yeah, I don't know. And then on top
serpent,
of it,
serpent spaghetti. Who knows what was in that,
been.
And then your daughter like wakes up and says Minerva no, and then she could have this attachment. I mean, this is hypothesis, but these
For
things
sure.
are far-fetched. I mean,
but where
underground
she
temples
is
have crazy power, which is the same reason, like when people go down under the Egyptian
underground.
pyramids
Yeah.
and stuff like that, like they're doing that for ritual purposes because they're spirits
Well,
down
that's what happened to Crowley. Aleister Crowley went into the underground of the Egyptian pyramids, and that's how he saw that spirit, Awas. And so, and you think I'm light and have Nephilim stuff? She's like 2 shades whiter than I am, bro.
your
Like
daughter.
she's got freckles and she's even lighter than me. Like she looks exactly like me, almost spit
And how
image.
tall is she?
We are all, my other daughter's 5'10", I'm 5'8.5", and that daughter's probably 5'8.5" too. Size 10
And I'm
shoes.
5'2", so we were
We're
talking.
tall women.
This is a question I have that I would love if anybody out there knows anything more about this than we do. But something that I've become really aware of as well is, I don't have the full understanding of this. Like God is very much working, like Scripture is coming alive. He's revealing a lot of things that we've been lied about and have been hidden from us, that we've been lied to about. And he's working with Holy Spirit to reveal these things to give us understanding. And especially like people like me and Heidi who come from these bloodline genetics, and where I'm dealing with, scales on my skin and serpent around my neck. I feel like these are things God's showing me, like you have serpent seed. And I do feel like there's something different about the Nephilim hybrid and serpent seed. And people go, oh, well, I thought that was the same thing. Because what I see is these two different looks is like my family has very small eyes, almost like beady eyes. And I see that in the really like incestuous, like Luciferian kind of children of the fallen. And then or not children of the fall, like children of the serpent. I don't even know how to explain it because it doesn't make full sense to me, but I can see a clear difference that the small beady eyes and then the big angelic eyes and the light from the dark and then the serpent, there's something going on genetically that looks different.
And what if he was drawn to her specifically because of that, like how you were saying about that like they know sometimes. And honestly, it was so weird because how she met her husband, and he is you think I'm tall, he is like 6'4", really tall, lanky with the extra long arms and hazel eyes and very light. And he walked up to her in a crowded airport out of nowhere and just said, God told me to talk to you. And that's how they met. And so I'm like,
and if anybody ever says that to y'all, say, who's your God and what's his name?
Yeah. Well, even if he says God, the normal God, you should be concerned because I'm telling you, and he's got a Nephilim head.
Well, because and that is the gift that the ritual of sodomy does. When it blows open the third eye, it makes you be able to see into the spirit. Not always, it depends on what your spiritual gifts are that God gave you and created you with. But if those are satanized and given over to the kingdom of darkness, a lot of these sodomites can see into the spirit. They can see your stars, they can see your destiny.
Right. And I think he knew not only with her that she was easy to manipulate because she was coming out of trauma, but I think he knew with me because I was getting very into Christ then. I was like, I'm against church. I just love God. I was telling him all this stuff though about the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And he only met me 3 times and he never came back.
Yeah.
And I was like, he took her for a reason because I think the genetics were there for pairing wise. And he comes from a long line of banking people, which they run stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it makes complete sense to me because he knew I would not be fooled. He knew.
Well, they can see the physical markers. They're trained on the physical markers. And then they also can see on the spiritual. They can see into the spiritual, some of them, and if they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear, or if they don't have the eyes to see, depending on their gifts, sometimes if they're enmeshed with demonic spirits or kundalini, false Holy Spirit, they will hear directly, like this person
is the person, their seed. Yeah. And I think it was that with
follower, somebody with the light of Jesus Christ is their first victim that they want to prey on. Sodomite men, Luciferian men, serpent seed, Nephilim hybrids seek out women of Christ. They want to take a woman down and they want to get you in their bed and they want to have sex with you immediately and they want to procreate. It's the same thing as the fallen angels. They want your baby and they either they want to take it and do abominations
Yeah.
with your child, because a lot of these men show up and disappear with your kids. And you
Well,
didn't know
and
the
don't
wiser,
you,
and all of a sudden they have custody of your kids. I see it. I get calls from so many women whose ex-husband has taken their kids and they're ritually abusing.
well, and they're smart and they know like how to like finesse. They know how, like how Joseph Smith was. And I mean, you don't get 33 to 38 wives, whatever he had, for nothing. Like these people have silver tongues, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he knew everything that she wanted to hear. And he also knew, and me and her were tight, like inseparable. And he knew everything to say to her to like make it be not that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the main point was control, you know? And now that he has full control, I mean, he tells everyone she's dead to us. I'll never speak to her. And if it's up to me, I'll never, and she's far, far away. And I'm even afraid if I did go there, that they would call the police on me, you know?
Wow.
But the whole thing is like, now I wouldn't be fooled. In Italy, I was fooled, but the guy came later after that. I mean, she had met him, but like we didn't know him yet. And as we were getting to know him, I was being sharper in the word every day. I was delving so hard into it. And I think he saw it. He saw that I was not going to go along to get along. And I
Well,
won't.
and this is where I say this is why it's so important to, when I left Mormonism, it was like, okay, everything they taught me was lies because they're all a bunch of perps. So why are you going to
That's for
take and
sure.
believe, hey, you shouldn't have premarital sex and fornication because I heard that from a bunch of sodomites who were, having me sexually abused when I was little, or sexually abusing me when I was little. And so then it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then my cult leader, the woman who ran this polyamorous group, one of the lies that she told us was that, and this is where you don't go study your own Bible yourself. You don't go and do the research and you believe a false prophet.
Oh, so true.
She told us that the word fornication did not mean in Hebrew sex before marriage. It had nothing to do with that. She told us that the word fornication meant to withhold love. So it has nothing to do with if you're not married to them, because when you have sex with somebody, you're automatically married to them. And if polyamory and polygamy is okay, then the sex is the marriage. And so it's
Right.
okay to have sex as long as you're in love. You just have to give your full heart and be in love, So this was her false serpent teaching. And this is why that is so wrong, because you go, well, premarital sex, fornication. Fornication is about sex outside of marriage. But she's also right. Sex is a marriage. When you go and fornicate with somebody, you really, truly do become one through a marriage covenant with them, which is why you
Spirit
have
ties.
to,
Yes.
renounce those soul bonds and spirit ties when after you realize what's gone on. And so you enter into, a marriage bed with somebody in fornication, and you open up a door of legal right to the enemy, and you have no idea who is in your bed. And you make a baby with them, and you're stuck with that serpent for
Oh, for
how
a
many
long
years.
time.
And
Yep.
in my situation, I married the serpent, and I still didn't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And God got me out of that marriage through this polyamorous cult. He actually sent in a guy. I shouldn't say God sent him in. Satan sent him in. God uses,
Right. He can use a
God
donkey.
knew I was going to do it, and God also knew that he needed to allow this man into my life. That God needed to allow Satan to send this man into my life, because Satan is
Right.
also under rule of God, in order to get me out of that marriage, because he probably wouldn't have let me out of the marriage had I not cheated on him. Even though he was trying to get me out of it, he wanted to do it in a way that he was in control of it.
Right. And it looks
Burnt
good on
his
him.
ego.
Yeah.
It burnt his ego so bad. He was livid.
Oh, wow.
And then he didn't want anything to do with me after that. And
Which was a
you know,
blessing. Yeah.
of course I had to do my own repentance and go through learning and understanding, because I was deceived into thinking like that open relationships or polyamory was a true spiritual teaching, that there was some truth to it. Because when you're raised with a wool over your eyes and told all your ancestors are polygamous, and all of your
and they did it. So
yeah, all of your ancestors, the prophet of your church has many wives who you're grown up singing praise to the man who communes.
Oh,
Like
yes.
gross.
Oh my gosh.
Like praising Joseph Smith in songs in church and talking about this Joseph more than you are Jesus. Then you think, oh, polygamy. Okay. Well, so what her teaching was, hey, the only reason Joseph was wrong when he went and tried to build Zion and, implemented the law of polygamy, the only reason he was wrong is because he did it one-sided. And that's why it was
Right.
wrong, because it was one-sided. It was only the man. The woman has to also be given equal right to extra spouses, or else it creates misery. And God is not a respecter of persons, and so the woman has to have the fair share too. And so Joseph just did it wrong. And so
Mm.
she claimed that she was Jesus Christ's other half,
Oh,
like Adam and Eve, like Eve was his
uh-huh.
rib, she was
The
Jesus's rib. And
split.
so God gave her the keys to polyamory to bring Joseph's truth. And I didn't necessarily believe her. I was just
Mm-hmm.
so brainwashed from Mormonism, and I was leaving. And she had, this is the thing that was crazy. She had so much biblical knowledge and truth. She had to have been given occult knowledge. She'd read every book there is. She was a healer. She was part of this medical order of hope, which is its own um, secret society, like, of healers. And she was definitely of a cult bloodline Mormon family who'd
Mm.
been given like knowledge and wisdom and shown patterns, probably by Satan himself, from the Bible, to be able to pick out, because there was some true wisdom. And God doesn't send out a
Right.
serpent to stand at the gate of Eden and tempt you before you try to get back in the gates of Eden, without making sure she has some major wisdom on her hands. And so she had a huge following. She was
Well,
very much.
you can absorb things when it's not in a good spirit. If it gives you a gift, it can give you a gift of all those things. Like,
Yeah.
there's been, I mean, Crowley's knowledge on books and Dee's knowledge on books. And actually, John Dee had the largest library of any man in all of Britain, period. And he was the one that coined and came up with one world order. So,
Yeah.
like, he's way more at play than most people think. But like, all this wisdom is given to these
Well,
people because
books are
that's
the
the
tree of
gift they want.
it's the forbidden wisdom. Books are the tree of knowledge
Hmm.
of good and evil, which is why I've even felt weird to even publish my book on paper. Like, I honestly think it's
Right.
time for another great book burning. I think it would be completely appropriate time to burn, 90% of the books on
A
this
lot
earth
of
that man has
stuff.
written, because
Yeah.
half of it, most of it, deceit
Well,
and
and
hidism men.
when you're writing, it's actually like a sigil too, because it gives it power when you actually write the written word, which
Mm-hmm.
is why they don't want us to do that. And they like us to type. Everything's
Yeah.
typed now. If you notice, they
Interesting.
don't want
Yeah.
people to learn cursive because part of it, and I mean, it's all part of this occult
That's probably
knowledge.
why I feel so drawn. Like, I have my dream journals are all I have pages and pages of dreams that I'll write in the morning.
Yep.
And it used to be really hard on, like, to sit and write that out,
Right. But it's
sore on my
part of
wrist and I'm half asleep.
manifestation.
But yeah.
Yeah, it really
Yes.
is.
So, anyway, she taught us this, principle that was like, and she didn't teach it publicly. She had all of
Right.
these preparatory tricks of teachings. She taught a class on paradox. So she would point to paradox in the Bible, which is like, oh, well, God is a God of paradox, and there's paradoxes all over. So this truth conflicts with this truth. It doesn't conflict.
Mm.
It's a paradox. So you have to fit it into the same paradigm. So she used that in a really serpentine kind of way,
Oh,
in order
she
to
was
draw you in.
wise.
And so in on the forefront, she was teaching great wisdom, and then on the back she was also had a dream interpreter who was interpreting dreams and working that way, who would falsely interpret your dreams and help you learn how to interpret dreams through their idea of what they wanted to see in your dreams.
Mm.
And then she would do privates with people, and then you would go into these privates, and then she would share with you, I had a dream. I actually had a dream where God told me to go to her, and I said, God told me that you have some secret wisdom and knowledge that you're keeping secret, and he
Oh,
told me to tell you to tell me. Literally, he
wow.
gave me a dream, because God literally sent me, and that was the first place he sent me a spy unto the Lord, to spy out a serpent, brood of serpents who were practicing something in darkness. And he allows me to go undercover and try on a belief for a little while until I figure it out. And that was what happened with them. And
Mm.
so I went in, and that was when she was like, oh, I wasn't ready to tell you yet, and all these things. But she was like, oh, and DNC 132, the new and everlasting covenant, is polyamory, and God is giving us, additional spouses. And so she goes into this whole, it was so crazy, because everything I'd learned about in Mormonism was brought into the forefront, current, present time, before my face. And all she was a female Joseph Smith, another
So
serpent
shit,
lying
but
at the
it made
gate.
sense to you because you've been
Well,
indoctrinated.
and I was
Yeah.
in a miserable marriage with a miserable man, which
Right.
was a sodomite, Iranian
Yeah.
Illuminati kind of like who hated me, who wanted nothing, who was my handler, who was, you know, set up to marry me. And so I was definitely in a position to be deceived, to go, oh, I could have some other husbands who might actually like me.
Right. Maybe,
Ooh.
maybe I want out of here. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I never would have left my husband because I was married to him in the temple and I was so brainwashed
Right.
into eternal life with him.
Right.
But, you know, the other thing she taught us was, hey,
Oh.
well, um, God will ask you to lie to your spouse, because if you're ascending into new and higher truths and your spouse isn't ready for that, then, you know, the Lord will allow you to take a spouse or a husband, a wife or a husband, without his knowledge, or because if
Mm.
he's not ready and he can't handle that truth, why would you need to be held back? And she even used the temple as that to go, well, the women and the men in the Mormon temple sit on opposite sides. You don't go in as a couple when you're married. The women sit over here and the men sit over here, and you go to the
Right.
male alone. So it's like, well, your ascension is your individual ascension. And so if
Oh.
you're gonna, you know, grow into the celestial from the telestial or the terrestrial, you know, if you want to live the celestial law, then maybe he's not ready, but God might give you a spouse sooner than that. And when I ended up cheating on my husband, it wasn't even with this group. I'd left them, they kicked me out because I started
Mm.
having dreams and visions. And I was like, well, I had this dream about this rod that was in her house. I actually stayed at her house one weekend when I went to help her sell some of her books. And I was shown this rod and I was like, it wasn't being used. And the whole group was just following her. Like they were sheeple. She was very much
Mm.
controlling of everyone. And she would always tell everybody, don't make me your God. I'm not your God. Do not make me your God. And so but really what she was doing is making herself your God
Right.
and then blaming it
Turning
on
it
you.
around.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And so, it ended up getting to the point where I'd had these dreams and I was like, yeah, there's this rod and nobody's using it. And I was like, what's going on? And how come she taught jealousy, envy, and strife. In order to build Zion and create what Joseph couldn't create, we have to get out of jealousy, envy, and strife. And in order to be in a relationship with multiple spouses, then we have to let go of jealousy, envy, and strife. She was the most jealous person on the planet because, you know, one of the guys in the group we started just being friends, and he was her main
Mm-hmm.
husband. She had another woman that was her wife. And the other thing is, it wasn't they were doing uh same sex stuff, right? So it wasn't
Mm.
like, this is
Okay.
your husband, this is your, and
Right.
that's the way, even like if you go back and look, like obviously King David, his
Mm-hmm.
wives weren't having sex with each other, you know, like
Mm-mm. Yeah.
this
They were just his wife. Yeah.
perversion. Yeah. So it was just another level of sex cults within Mormonism. So
Mm.
so it got to the point where, you know, I started challenging some things and asking some questions, and I started having, that was when my gift of vision actually started opening up. And the thing that's crazy is, one thing that God taught me about this serpent was she was my greatest and worst teacher, because she gave me major truths that opened some of my spiritual gifts, but she also presented me with some major lies. So she would be one of my greatest teachers, because wow, did I learn a lot from her. So thank you. Thank you for everything you
You're
brought.
like, I knew
Yeah.
it.
So she she started I started challenging some things. And one of the ladies in the group, she was like, your gift of vision is crazy. I've never met anybody that gets more like spiritually from than her, because we would bring our visions and dreams like to the table and talk about them and
Together.
discuss what we were getting. And it was clear, probably because she could see, even I was still learning how to interpret my own dreams then. And she probably could see even more of what I could see at the time, that God was exposing her to me, big time.
Mm.
So she called the whole group together and she said to me, Sharisa, you are a very powerful woman. And she says, and I've been building up this group for, over 10 years. And she said, and everything that I have built up, you have the power and ability to tear down, and you're dangerous. And so she was like, you're going to
Oh,
have to leave the group. And
wow.
at the time I was kind of like butthurt a little bit about it, because she did have so much knowledge and wisdom. But at the same time, I was like, good riddance. You guys are freaking weird. Um,
Right.
but um, it was funny because I did have the power to tear it down. And when I left, like, I didn't even go and tell anybody. Like, I'm happy to share her name at some point. I'd love to talk. Actually,
Right.
her name's Karen Preer. I'll say that right now, because she has a book out that's called Seven. Oh, now I can't remember. Everything was sevens. Everything was about sevens with her.
That's a very
Yeah,
occult.
yeah. now I can't think of any of the names of her group, but you can find all of her stuff online. She has, her book was very powerful. It was one of the most amazing patterns in the Bible. She pulls out all these patterns of sevens all over in the Bible that were very much there, like the structural literary patterns in the Bible she could see. And so she after she kicked me out of the group, you know, like, and I was really doing a lot to help her sell her books. I sold a lot of her books and CDs when we would go to conferences and stuff. But you know, she was having sexual relationships. They had an apartment, and they had an apartment outside of all their homes, so they could go and meet at this separate apartment. And in the group would pay the rent for this apartment, and everybody would just go there. And after I left Mormonism, the very first time I ever smoked pot again, for the first time, I was with that group at that apartment smoking. And it was so funny because God does this thing with me where he shows me something before I even realize what he's showing me. And the first time I smoked pot back in the day, but I hadn't for years. I'd been Mormon, and I had taken out my garments and was kind of like done with Mormonism by then, but I was still married, and we're just hanging out, and I smoked. And the guy who was kind of her main husband guy, who I had become friends with, was there. And I hit it. And I just started laughing my ass off for like an hour, like cackling, like it was, I don't even know what was funny. I literally was like, oh, there you are, God. Because my experiences in indigenous medicine or in plant medicine was always very spiritual. I never used it as like a drug or like a whatever. I always went into it with a prayer and with like it was always like a sacrament for me. And so I was even using it in this moment as like a sacrament. And I just needed to laugh because I'd been in a miserable marriage for years under a type of manipulative abuse I didn't even fully understand. So I am just laughing my butt off. And I remember I went and like got on her face because she was, you know, very holier than thou and very high up in the group. So they kind of revered her. And I was like in her face, and I was like, you are hilarious. And I was like, you're funny, Karen. She was like, what's so funny? And she was scared. I was freaking her out, you know, because
she doesn't know what to do.
Because people like witches don't smoke. They can't smoke weed because it breaks down their programming, and they're like enmeshment with wicked spirits and stuff. Like it breaks that down. So she couldn't handle it. And I just kept laughing in her face. I didn't even know what I was laughing at. And I go, you're funny. And she's like, what? And I was like, God thinks you're funny. And really what God was laughing in her face through.
He was like mocking
look how many people you are taking away from their families. She broke up so many marriages, you know, and brought adultery into so many homes. And he was just like laughing in her face of like, baby, I got your number. I can see. So, and she was jealous because I was smoking with her husband guy, you know, and who's her second. And she ended up having a freak out breakdown. They had to take her home. Oh my gosh. Like one of the women, you know, they also did women's priesthood. So the women in this group were giving blessings and stuff. So she had to have this woman like give her a blessing because she lost it because I saw her. I didn't even know what I saw the truth yet, but I saw, and she kicked me out after that. So anyway, this is just to point to again, my experience in a Joseph Smith type scenario to go, I felt like I knew him, and I knew this all along. I was like, God is bringing this to me to have this experience as a Jacob or as a Joshua, Caleb type spy in the land, to spy out a giant. And this woman's like definitely serpent seed Nephilim, something going on there. And she, you know, had this ability to tantalize people into her group that was mind blowing. And you know, she was still wearing her garments and going to the temple, and a lot of them she was entertaining are, you know, writing Mormon books, high up names that if I said you would probably recognize. And she was running in these circles and selling her books with a lot of like famous Mormon
I can't imagine going back after knowing the truth. Like if she knew the truth to that level, like it was so bad not knowing the truth and being confused, let alone if I went now, I mean, I never would, but like it would just be traumatizing, I feel like.
Well, and this is the question I always want to ask people like her that I meet, because that's only one of many stories of people I've come across who are setting out with a deceit. And my question that I want to ask them, and I feel like with her, okay, do you really believe this lie? And are you just so deceived that you are just selling what you believe because you just believe this? Or are
Right.
you an agent of the enemy and a sly serpent, and you know it? And so this is your job. Because I know a lot of these people in these occult bloodline families know that they are serpent seed and that their job is
Yeah.
to recruit, and that they're given this
Well,
knowledge to do that.
or they just have it inherent, like in their blood, like to know, like how we were talking about how if you encounter someone that is truly evil or a witch or whatever, and you are walking with Christ, like they will hate you. They will hate your spirit. I've had it happen more times than not, where you just walk in a room or something and it's immediate. So is it immediate for them inside of them walking in that spirit to do the same thing? Do you know what I mean? Is it even something they think about, or does it
Yeah.
just occur?
Yeah.
I think it's inherent because some people, I don't want to say all people, but like a lot of people can be inherently evil
Yeah.
if placed in a certain position.
Well, I
I
know
don't
within the
know.
bloodlines there are plenty who are inherently evil, know that
Yep.
they're children of the devil. They're told that what they're told is that we're here to bring on the apocalypse. Our job is to
Mm-hmm.
deceive humanity. We play this. Oh, this is another important part
Usher
of the
it in.
teaching.
Usher it in. Uh-huh.
Yes, because I forgot, this is one of the things that they teach is that all will be saved. They used to talk about how all will be saved, even Satan will be saved. That's how big and great God's love is. God loves so much. Everyone will be.
No.
He can't afford to lose one soul. That's how much he loves. This was the lie that they were telling of the devil. And there was this one girl in the group who literally, her role, because everybody had a role. That was what they were always teaching.
Right.
What's your role in the building of Zion? What's your keys to the kingdom? What's going to be what you do? What are you called to do? So everybody was, receiving this information from fallen angels through their dreams and visions. And what this one girl had said that her role was to do was she was Satan's savior, and that it would
Oh,
be a female who,
brother.
and that her role in the millennium was to have incestuous sex with her own brother to save him,
Oh,
that would redeem Satan. It was the craziest thing I'd ever heard, but at the time I was so brainwashed, and the whole Joseph Smith, and there was so much incest already. It's not like I believed it, but it was just kind of like, huh.
it's
You,
not
you
that
don't
far of a
immediately you
jump,
don't
is it?
immediately go, you're freaking nuts. You just go, huh,
Yeah.
is that possible? Because they're really good at telling the story. I don't have 8 hours to tell you all the
Yeah.
mysteries and by scriptures that they go into back all this stuff up.
But I tell you, I've been fooled. You've been fooled. We're smart people. Like I'm a college graduate twice. Like some of these people, a lot of these people are doctors and tie up. And even the ones that maybe don't know and aren't aware, how there's some people they don't like advance all the way.
Yeah.
I still feel like you step out and you go, wow, was I really that stupid?
Mm-hmm.
And
You do. I kicked
I don't
myself in the
know.
head so many times for even sticking around these people as long as I did, even though I
Yeah.
often didn't like play it out or act on things the way a lot of people in those groups did. Because I know the
Yeah.
reason I ended up roaming in a lot of the circles that I did was to be able to have experiences, to be able to come out and bear testimony and witness, because God knew my heart,
Yes.
and he knew I would repent and see the truth and find the way. And, I was allowed to go blindly and sin in ignorance in some of these groups, with that. So to come out with a story to tell, to come out to expose them and
Yeah.
say, okay, I tried that belief
This
on.
happened.
This is how I know it's a lie.
This is what's happened because of it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's me and you being born into these families, these hybrid families, in
But
order to come out.
what makes it like the difference for us, I wonder sometimes, because like my husband is like us, but he was even more so. He got out very young. He never went through like from the get-go, he's like, this is garbage.
He didn't go through the temple, you mean?
Nope. He
Yeah.
was like 16 years old. He's like, you can't make me go anymore. I'm not going, you know?
Mhm.
And I mean, they persecute you, and same for me later, much later, same for you. But why is it that there's a few of us that go, nope,
Well, and
that's the key.
that is something that is in the Bible. And why I the only reason, and it's funny because the further along I come, and when I was kind of in new age and stuff and kind of like thinking I knew something, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't know nothing. I was wrong about all of that stuff. It was all
Oh
lies
man.
to me. and
Yeah.
and then and then you're like, oh man, and then you go back to the Bible and you're like, oh, what? I was so deceived. And then you're just kind of like, how did I go be so stupid and like make so many mistakes and live in such a sinful way for so many years? And, I also don't kick myself because it's like, okay, I was sexualized from my infancy, And
Right.
so I don't
Right.
blame myself for a lot of those stupid decisions that I made because there was abuses that were done to me. And so I give myself grace and mercy in that. But I have to go, wow, like, why did I get chosen out of my family to not end up like being in that crap and being
Right.
expendable from birth? Thank God. Thank
That's wild.
Yahweh that I was labeled expendable in my birth and not had to be under a lot of the crap that my families had to be under and go through the same level of abuses that they have because why? Because I didn't do nothing. It's not about,
Yeah.
this is
It's
how
so
I
weird.
know that God created me for a purpose. He put all of these gifts and abilities in me. He arranged all of these things in my life. He let the enemy have his hand, and he led me out of this family because I was called and chosen.
Isn't that wonderful?
I was just
It's
called
like,
chosen. He just and I could have messed it up worse, and people are called and chosen and don't
yeah,
do what they're created for. But what did I do? How come we're different? Because he created me for this. Praise Yah. Praise him.
praise, yeah.
I praise him all the time. Like, thank you for creating me to not have to be a serpent.
Stuck in that
So,
forever. Yeah,
thank you. Because
stuck in the bloodline
yeah,
trauma to traumatize your own kids. Like, you
because
know,
I could have easily ended up where what I
yeah.
despise
Mm-hmm.
didn't put that in me. He put in me to despise those things. He created
Yep.
me that way. And so, it says in the Bible that God even created the evil, the wicked for the day of evil.
Right.
He created all things for his purpose,
Yep.
So I was created for his purpose. So thank him. Why?
Yes.
Because he chose. That's how he chose
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do
We
it.
were lucky. We were the lucky defectors because I'll tell you,
Right.
I'm glad that I the things I've shared with you and my own family and that I witnessed that I have to see, and then you feel sad and powerless and helpless I'm like, I'm just glad that that's not my
Yeah.
kids, you know.
Well, and it's such a blessing because I just, you have your kids and you go, oh my gosh, I can't imagine if something happened to my kids
No,
like what happened with me when I was
no.
little. And I know I started when my kids were infants. I used to tiptoe up when their dad would fall asleep in bed with them, and I couldn't know any of this stuff then, and I had no reason. I didn't understand why at that time I was like, I would change my kids' diapers and I would just have these weird thoughts go through my head, and they weren't mine. It wasn't anything I desired, just like what is that? Where does that come from? And it would make me sick. And it's because
Mm,
I had spirits and iniquity on my bloodline that I was unaware of, and,
right,
and then I would
right.
go in when my kid's dad would be sleeping, fall asleep in their bed, putting them to bed and wouldn't come to bed or something. I would sneak in and look in and just like make sure nothing was happening. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
why do I feel the need to do that? What am I looking
Right.
for? Because I didn't have knowledge or memory of that, but I was incredibly overprotective. And if there were little kids,
Mm-hmm.
like, all my little girlfriends were all humping each other in the neighborhood when I was growing up. If there was one little girl that tried to hold hands or play house with my daughter, I was like, goodbye, you're done.
Yep.
Nope.
No. Yep.
And so he just put that in me. He
Yeah.
created me that way. So thank you for creating me that way, Yahweh,
Mm-hmm.
because um I I didn't do anything to
You
deserve that.
didn't.
I
Yeah.
didn't, there's nothing of myself that made him choose
Mm-mm.
me for that purpose. That was his will. And so, it'll be really interesting as you go through your, well, because as you reached out to me, you had started having some of your own memories and things going on in your
Yep.
family. You've shared with
Yeah.
us that you
So
have,
crazy. Yeah.
you were aware of the Nephilim genetics, which I was really excited to find out that there's somebody out there because
Yes.
I knew this. I knew, I said, God, I'd been praying for you for a long time because I'm like,
Oh my
God, I
gosh.
know that this family that I grew up with who talks about their six finger knows they're Nephilim, but they're not going to tell me that. I know
Right.
they know they are. So I know there's a family that has to have used this word in their family and talked about it
Yep.
openly and admittedly knows that they are Nephilim genetics. And I had not met a single soul until you. So I'm so grateful that
That's
you
so
come forward
wild.
and shared this to be able to say,
And I was like,
I
they
have
just,
pieces of your
yeah,
puzzle, you have pieces that I've
yeah,
been praying for. And the stuff that I, talked about made you have a whole discovery of things in your childhood that you're still going to be discovering.
yes,
So we're not going to
yeah.
talk about any of that stuff yet, but
But it's wild. Yeah.
suffice it to say, within everything that we've talked about, the Nephilim being obsessed with incest and
Oh yeah.
themselves and genetic bloodline and sex parties
All
and
of
stuff
it.
like that. Like you have stuff like that in your family
Crazy.
that you've discovered. And so it'll be interesting
So
when you're ready to
crazy.
talk about that at some point to go into all of that. And so we're going to,
Overwhelming.
continue talking about Mormonism and exposing Mormonism.
Yes.
We're going to do some more
Yes.
episodes. Today we talked about how the Mormon church is an Antichrist Nephilim cult. And
Yes.
we can say that as firsthand witnesses, having grown up in the families that we have grown up in. And we hope and pray that the world will continue to have eyes opened to the realities of what Mormonism is, the great and abominable church, the whore of all of the earth that has recruited more incestuous, horrific abominations into the families of the children of men than I would say any other religion on the earth, save it be and the Mormons point to the Catholics and say they're the great and abominable church, and they would know because they share their
Right.
rituals underground with
Takes
their
one to know one.
Catholic brothers. Exactly. Right. So we'll go into some more stuff about the temple in a
Yes.
few upcoming episodes. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Heidi, before we wrap up for the day?
Nope, I think we did a pretty good job. Hopefully we're gonna make it through to some other people that know what we know and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Hey, if you know any of this stuff, if you have this stuff going on, reach out. Let's talk.
Yes, let's do it.
All
All
right.
right.
Hey, have a good one.
You too.